The Polish Hussars, or Winged Hussars, were one of the main types of the cavalry in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth between the 16th and 18th centuries. When this cavalry type was first introduced by the Serbian and Hungarian mercenary horsemen at the beginning of the 16th century, they served as light cavalry banners in the Polish army. By the second half of the 16th century and after Stephen Bathory's reforms, Hussars had been transformed into heavily armoured shock cavalry. Until the reforms of the 1770s, the Husaria banners were considered the elite of the Polish cavalry. The word hʊťzār derives from the Hungarian həťzār. Exiled Serbian warriors introduced hussar horsemen, light cavalry armed with hollowed lance, Balkan-type shield, and sabre. The Hungarian kingdom's hussar banners were organized into a strong, highly trained and motivated formation during the reign of King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary. Under his command, the various hussar banners took part in the wars against the House of Habsburg, Bohemia, Poland and the Ottoman Empire, and proved successful against the Turkish cavalry as well as Bohemians, Germans, Austrians, and Poles. In the Kingdom of Hungary, various peoples made changes to the hussar armament and thus introduced armor in terms of helmets, mail, gorgets, making hussars much heavier cavalry than when they first started around 1500. The Kingdom of Hungary's lance-armed, armor-clad hussar troops existed first in the armies of Hungary and her vassal principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia, and later in the Habsburg armies until the early 17th century. The Hungarian, Wallachian and Moldavian hussars abandoned armor and the heavy lances during the course of wars and pillages in the late 17th century, reinventing themselves as scrimmage, reconnaissance and pillage horsemen, becoming light cavalry, similar to the Croats in Habsburg service. In the 18th century, when Rákóczi's uprising failed in Hungary, many noble hussars, with their retainers, fled to other Central and Western European countries and became the core of similar light cavalry formations created there. For instance, the first French hussar regiment created and trained by Count Miklos Bercy-Szányi, starting with the War of the Austrian Succession. The Prussian army used Hungarian-style hussar regiments extensively in the wars of Frederick the Great. History. The hussars originated in mercenary units of exiled Serbian warriors, the concept having originated in Serbia in the late 14th century. The oldest mention of hussars in Polish documents date to 1500, although they were probably in service earlier. In the 15th century, light hussars based on those of King Matthias Corvinus were adopted by some European armies to provide light, expendable cavalry units. More spectacular were the heavy hussars that developed in the Kingdom of Poland. Initially, the first hussar units in the Kingdom of Poland were formed by the Sejm in 1503, which hired 3 banners of Hungarian mercenaries. Soon, recruitment also began among Polish citizens, being far more expendable than the heavily armored lances of the Renaissance. The Serbian-Hungarian hussars played a fairly minor role in the Polish crown victories during the early 16th century, exemplified by the victories at Warsaw and Obertin. During the so-called transition period of the mid-16th century, heavy hussars largely replaced armored lancers riding armored horses. In the Polish Obrona-Potyczna cavalry forces serving on the southern frontier, the true Winged Hussar arrived with the reforms of the King of Poland and Grand Duke of Lithuania Stephen Bathory in the 1570s and was later led by the King of Poland and Grand Duke of Lithuania Jan III Sobieski. The hussars were the leading, or even elite, branch of cavalry in the Polish army from the 1570s until 1776, when their duties and traditions were passed on to the ULANs by a parliamentary decree. Most hussars were recruited from the wealthier Polish nobility. Each hussar Taurus raised his own pochet or lance retinue. Several retinues were combined to form a hussar banner or company. Over the course of the 16th century, hussars in Hungary became heavier in character. They abandoned wooden shields and adopted metal-plated body armor. When Bathory was elected King of Poland and later accepted as a Grand Duke of Lithuania in 1576, he reorganized the hussars of his royal guard into a heavy formation equipped with a long lance as their main weapon. By the reign of Bathory, the hussars had replaced medieval-style lances in the Polish Crown Army, and they now formed the bulk of the Polish cavalry. By the 1590s, most Polish hussar units had been reformed along the same heavy model. These heavy hussars were known in Poland as Husaria. With the Battle of Lubyszyw in 1577, the «golden age» of the Husaria began. Between then and the Battle of Vienna in 1683, the hussars fought many battles against various enemies, most of which they won. In the battles of Lubyszyw in 1577 by Chinna, Kochenhausen, Kichem, Klushin, Czosem, Martynów, Trzciana, Ochmatów, Berestechko, Polongar, Konów, Czosem, Lwow, Vienna, and Parkany, they proved to be the decisive factor against often overwhelming odds. For instance, in the Battle of Klushin during the Polish-Muscovite War, the Russians outnumbered the Commonwealth army 5-1, yet were heavily defeated. The role of the hussar evolved into a reconnaissance and advanced scout capacity. Their uniforms became more elaborate as their armor and heavy weapons were abandoned. In the 18th century, as infantry firearms became more effective, heavy cavalry, with its tactics of charging into and breaking infantry units, became increasingly obsolete, and hussars transformed from an elite fighting unit to a parade one. Instead of ostrich feathers, the Husaria men wore wooden arcs attached to their armor at the back and raising over their heads. These arcs, together with bristling feathers sticking out of them, were dyed in various colors in imitation of laurel branches or palm leaves, and were a strangely beautiful sight to behold. Jedrzej Kitowicz. The hussars were famous for their huge wings, a wooden frame carrying eagle, ostrich, swan or goose feathers. In the 16th century, characteristic painted wings or winged claws began to appear on cavalry shields. The most common theory is that the hussars wore the wings because they made a loud, clattering noise which made it seem like the cavalry was much larger than in reality and frightened the enemy's horses. Other possibilities included the wings being made to defend the backs of the men against swords and lassos, or that they were worn to make their own horses deaf to the wooden noisemakers used by the Ottoman and the Crimean Tatars. Tactics. The hussars represented the heavy cavalry of the Commonwealth. The Taurus Hussar commanded his own pochet consisting of 2 to 5 similarly armed retainers and other servants who tended to his horses, food, supplies, repairs and fodder, and often participated in battle. His lance was part of a larger unit known as a banner. Each banner had from 30 to over 60 kopia. The commander, per his contractual obligation, was called Rotmistras, while the de facto commander was often the poruchnik. There was also one Korozy who carried the banner's flag and could command the banner when the poruchnik was unable to. Each banner had one Rotmistras kopia that was larger than its other lances. This included trumpeters and musicians. There were other Taurusar with duties within the banner during battle, but their functions are rather poorly understood. The Polish Hussars' primary battle tactic was the charge. They charged at and through the enemy. The charge started at a slow pace and in a relatively loose formation. The formation gradually gathered pace and closed ranks while approaching the enemy, and reached its highest pace and closest formation immediately before engagement. They tended to repeat the charge several times until the enemy formation broke. The tactic of a charge by heavily armored hussars and horses was usually decisive for nearly 2 centuries. The hussars fought with a long lance, a konches, a zablad set of 2 to 6 pistols, often a carbine or arquebus, and sometimes a warhammer or light axe. In addition, there was no West European stigma attached to the use of a bow and arrows. The more English view was held. It is possible that projectile weapons were used to weaken the enemy's infantry squares and to create a domino effect. The lighter, Ottoman-style saddle allowed for more armor to be used by both the horses and the warriors. Moreover, the horses were bred to run very fast with a heavy load and to recover quickly. These were hybrids of old Polish equine lineage and Eastern horses, usually from Tatar tribes. As a result, a horse could walk hundreds of kilometers loaded with over 100 kilograms and instantly charge. Also, Hussar horses were very quick and maneuverable. This made Hussars able to fight with any cavalry or infantry force, from Western heavy cuirassiers to quick Tartars. Armor and weaponry. Hussar half-armor from the mid-17th century, National Museum in Krakow. Hussar armor, dating to the first half of the 17th century, Polish Army Museum in Warsaw. Scale armor of King Jan III Sobieski. Polish Hussar saber. The Hussars Taurus were required to provide the arms and armor for themselves and their retainers, except for the lance, which was provided by the king. Each lance's horses also came at each Taurus Hussar's expense. During their heyday, 1574 to 1705, Winged Hussars carried the following arms and armor. The kopia lance was the main offensive weapon of the Hussar. The lances were based on the Balkan and, finally, Hungarian lances, but Polish lances could have been longer and, like their predecessors from the Balkans and Western Europe, they were hollowed, with two halves glued together and painted, and were often richly gilded. They were commonly made from fir wood, with the lance point being made from forged steel. They had a galka, large wooden ball which served as the handle guard. A large, silk taffeta proporzeck pennon was attached to the lance below the point. Another type of lance, known as the demi-lance or kopijaka, was used and could have been 3 to 3.6 meters long and was used against the Tartars and Turks in late 17th century wars. The Taurus Hussar carried underneath his left thigh an Eastern-derived konches estoc and, often, a palaz under his right thigh. The zabla saber was carried on the left side, and several types of sabers were known to Winged Hussars, including the famous zabla husarska. Winged Hussars sometimes carried additional weapons, such as nadziak, type of war hammers and battle axes. Taurus Hussar carried one or two wheel-lock pistols in the saddle holsters, while retainers also might have carried a pistol or light wheel-lock arquebus or carbine. From the 1680s, a carbine for retainers was mandatory. Individual Hussar Taurus may possibly have carried a Tatar or Turkish reflex bow with arrows in a quiver, especially after the mid-17th century, when many panzerni companions became Hussars, and some sources of the late 17th century note the existence of bows amongst the Hussar companions. During the first half of the 18th century, while in non-military attire, the Hussar's companion carried a bow in a bow case to denote his military status. Yet bows in bow cases were carried by all cavalry officers of the National Army until the reforms of the 1770s, including ULAN units in the Saxon service. At the height of their prowess, from 1576 to 1653, Hussar armor consisted of a Polish variant of the Sisak Oriental Turkic-originated helmet with a hemispherical skull, comb-like, Western morion, cheek pieces with a heart-shaped cut in the middle, neck guard of several plates secured by sliding rivets, and adjustable nasal, terminating in a leaf-shaped visor. Shishak and kettle hat helmets for the lower rank were often blackened, as was their armor. A cuirass, backplate, gorget, shoulder guards, and of the Great Steppe, a Western vambraces with iron glove, and later, during the 1630s, the Persian-originated Karwash vambrace, for forearm protection. Taurus also could wear tassut hip, creased thigh and poline knee protection, underneath a thigh-length coat of mail or specially padded coat with mail sleeves. Retainers usually wore less expensive and older armor, often painted black, and, after the 1670s, might have no cuirass. According to some sources, Karasinus Sarmatian armor might have consisted of a scale helmet, cuirass, gorget, leg and shoulder protection, and became popular during the reign of King Jan Sobieski, but perhaps due to costs and weight, remained popular mostly with the Winged Hussar commanding officers. Their armor was light, usually around 15 kilograms, allowing them to be relatively quick and for their horses to gallop at full speed for long periods. Albeit from the 1670s onwards, chain mail was used when fighting the Tatars in the southern part of the Republic. Taurus usually wore a leopard pelt over his left shoulder, or as often depicted in the surviving pod horse castle paintings, he had the exotic pelt underneath his saddle or wrapped around his hips. Wolf, brown bear and lynx pelts were reserved for leaders and veterans. Legacy. The Polish Hussars are depicted on the commemorative 200 złotych gold coin, and the badge of the Polish Army's 1st Armored Division is inspired by armor of Winged Hussars. Hussars 200 złotych gold coin. Badge of the Polish Army's 1st Armored Division. Bibliography. Zbigniew Boszyński, ze Studio Nadpolska z Broja W. Rozprawy I Sprawozdania Muzeum Narodowego w Krakowie. T. V. Brzezinski, Richard. Polish Armies 1569–1696. Osprey Publishing. pp. 14. ISBN 978-0-85045-736-0. Richard Brzezinski, Velimir Vuksich. Polish Winged Hussar, 1500–1775. Oxford, Osprey, 2005. ISBN 1-84176-650-X. Jan S. Bystron, Duży Bishajo W. Dornge Pols, Warsaw 1932. Jerzy Czytowski, Andrzej Solczynski. Husaria, Warsaw. Widor, Ministerstwo Obrony Narodowej, 1981. ISBN 83-11-06568-3. Piotr Drozd, also 1518. Syria. Historyczne Bitwy, Belona, Warsaw 2000. Galeria, Brony Barła W. Pols. Prudnik, Muzeum Narodowy w Krakowie, Kraków 2004. Bronislaw Jębaszewski. Hʊťzār, Ubia, Oporzadzenie Zbrojenie, 1500–1775. Warsaw. Wydornik to Arcadia, 1999. ISBN 83-88055-011-1. Krystyna Kaczmarek, Remigiusz Kaczmarek, Romuald Kaczmarek, Jan Sobieski, Jaka Zolners Iwods W. Spoltesnaj mu Grafis, C. said. 2. Which are nie techniczne WSZ Cole, 2005, near 2. 39–42. Romuald Kaczmarek, Jan Sobieski, Jaka Zolners Iwods W. Spoltesnaj mu Grafis, C. said. 1. Which are nie techniczne WSZ Cole, 2005, near 1. 26–29. Włodzimierz Kwasniewicz. Lexicon Brony Bielgimia Tarda Siege. Warsaw. Belona, 2003. ISBN 83-11-09617-1. Miroslaw Nagielski. Relacja Wojenne z Pierwszych Polsko Kozaków Powstania Bodana Chmielnickiego Okresu Ogniermijexem. Warsaw. Viking, 1999. ISBN 83-912638-0-0. Jan Chrysostom Pasek. Pamiętniki. Warsaw. Państwowy Instytut Wydawniczy, 1987. ISBN 83-06-01577-0. Leszek Podhorodecki, Czosem 1621, Syria. Historyczne Bitwy, Monday, 1988. Zuzanna Soroka. Kon W. Zisiu Shalok TWXVI 18W. Turin. Widor, A. Marsalek, 2002. ISBN 83-7174-839-6. Radoslaw Sikora, Fenomen Husaria, Turin. Duet, 2003. ISBN 83-918712-8-2. Radoslaw Sikora, Klushin 1610. Wid. I. Warsaw. Erica, 2010. 160. ISBN 97883-62329-052. Radoslaw Sikora, Lubis Zo 17 IV 1577, Zabza. Widornik 2 in Fit Editions, 2005, ISBN 83-89943-050. Radoslaw Sikora, Zdzisław Husaria, Warsaw. Erica, 2010, ISBN, EAN, 97883-62329-04-5. Janusz Sikorski, Zdzisław Wojska Polski do Roku 1864, T1. Jerzy Teodorczyk, Bitwa pod Newham 22, IX 29, IX. 1626, PF Soporajka Husarii, W. Studiei Materiali do Historii Wojskowosi, 12, Warsaw 1966. Robert Szatesniak, Klushin 1610, Syria. Historyczne Bitwy. Bellona, Warsaw 2008. Henryk Wisner, Kirkham 1605, Syria. Historyczne Bitwy. Mon, Warsaw 1987. Zdzisław Igalski. Bron W. Dąć Puls na Tli Zbrojenia Europei Bliskiego w Szodziu. Warsaw. Pone, 1982. ISBN 83-01-025158. Zdzisław Igalski. Bron Wadzois Olnet C. Kraków. Kluszczynski, 1998. Zdzisław Igalski. Husaria Polska. Warsaw. Pagana, 2000. OCLC 830,218,879.